Welcome to the Masculine Revolution, hosted by Jeremy Brown and myself, Murphy G. Today we got special guest with us, Mr. Tim Keim. Appreciate you coming on this morning.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes, sir. We got the great Alan Black with us, up early. Yeah, man, glad to be here. Excited for what you got for us. Jeremy, you want to bring us into it?
Yeah, Tim, we're pumped to have a conversation with you and get some of this wisdom you're about to, lay out in front of us. Before we kind of dig into the topic, why don't you kind of give us some context of kind of your story?
Wow, that's a whole God thing that could take us another whole session. But I started out in ministry, and that remained like a lot of who I am, in terms of how I approach life and approach things. But along the way, then God opened up doors and led me to not to be a paid preacher anymore, but got into the area of financial planning, and God built a business that I never could have imagined. I've retired from that, but the ministry part I've always continued to do a lot of, and there's several years my wife and I were actually in the Republic of Panama, where I was pastoring an expat church, English-speaking church down there. So the ministry part has just continued to be a big part of who I am. It's all of it. It's just all-encompassing, just doing different things, different times. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What was the biggest thing in Panama that you learned, you think?
Well, that was a different season, and that's the segue into our topic here. But, that we learned about seasons and how God leads us and does different things, because that was a season that had very special blessings, and at the same time it was a season with some incredible challenges. And so we had to learn about navigating seasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Well, let's dig in. Seasons.
Well, first thing I would want to say, though, is your listeners may not know that we're recording this like at 6 o'clock in the morning, and and my phone is still in sleep mode. So it's calling me out saying I'm stupid for being up and around at this time. So if I say anything that doesn't make sense, just chalk it up to it's early.
That's
okay,
right.
Is the thing I'd say. And I would also think your listeners don't know how many gray hairs I got. So, I've been around the sun a few times, and so that's part of what I bring. But seasons, as I just think about it, that's a word we use a lot in just kind of describing what's going on. Really what we're referring to is it's just some sort of period of time when there's a theme going on in life, okay?
Right.
Where during this particular period of time, here's a couple of themes that just seem to be very prominent in our mind, almost controlling. They're the foremost priorities of what's going on right now, and obviously they can overlap. You can be in several different seasons, and I don't want to get too intricate with this definition, because it's really the concept and not just a bright definition of it that really I think is where we're going to go. But, so during this period of life when there's this major theme, let's talk about examples. Like a season of life that's small children in the house. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
A season of life when it's teenagers at the house, because it's a different thing. Obviously, some of you may have both of those going on at the same time. A season where you're caring for parents and aging parents. And I know in the small group that my wife and I lead, that's a major theme. People my age, we're either caring for parents or we just finished caring for parents and things like that. A season where maybe it's your career and your job that you're really trying to get that going, and it's consuming a lot of attention. A season of financial difficulties. Certain seasons aren't marked by just what's going on circumstantially, but what's going on in our lives.
Yeah.
A season where we're battling addiction, a season where we're battling other challenges, marital difficulties, retirement, seasons where there's just a lot of stress or a lot of conflict. So I would think that any of us, well, I guess the best place to start is how would you describe the season you're in right now? You know, what's your season? What's your main themes?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a good bit of them that we're in the middle of. You know, we got teenagers in the home, you know, elementary school as well. I feel like, you know, I've been in my career now for about 20 years, you know, so I feel like it's taken probably about like 15 years to really get some momentum going.
And feel like you know what you're doing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as know what I'm doing, you know. It may look like I know what I'm doing, but really I'm just shooting from the hip, baby. But you know, so a lot of different ones that you shared, you know. I feel like financial side of things, you know, always seems to change. You know, there's moments. I mean, I guess you could call it seasons, but I don't even know if it's how. Let me ask you this before I answer that though. Like, what would you qualify, or would you have a definition to like a time frame of a season, or is it just?
I think it's usually something that's measured at least in months, but you know, it's not a hard and fast definition. It's something you can kind of look back on and say, there's something going on here that wasn't just, hey, I had a strange week, you know. Yeah. there's this new pattern that's emerging, this new priority, this new something that's consuming me and sometimes tripping me up or sometimes challenging me. Yeah. Murphy, where are you right now in the seasons?
Man, let's see. I got three small. My oldest is will be 11 this year, and then my youngest is she'll be 5. So I got young children, not babies, and so yeah. I mean, honestly, I've come out of a dark season, and I've been probably in this good season for about 8 years, and I mean, the marriage has been good. It's crazy because I feel like from like 18 to 25 was just going through the ringer, and then it's like coming out of that, it's just been gradually getting better. And then but like right now, I think I'm just in a really good season. I mean, we're enjoying our kids, we're enjoying our home, and we're just working hard. So,
well, the thing about seasons too is they continually change.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and sometimes that's the challenge because you feel like just about the time you kind of got a handle on what's going on around you, then it's different. You know, and when you got small children in the house, and I remember this as you know when my kids were small, and just you know logistically and. You know, my wife had to be at work really, really early, and so I was getting up 2 preschoolers and feeding them and getting them ready for school, and I have no earthly idea now looking back how I did that, but I did, you know, and the challenges that go with that. But then you realize that sometimes every week that passes, some of that gets a little easier. They can do a little more for themselves and something like that. And then you get into the teenage years, and now we hit some new challenges and some new seasons. And of course, while all that's going on, then we're dealing with businesses and finances and relationships and all that. So I guess one of the things about seasons is the only thing you can say is a constant is that they change. Yeah. You know, and at any given moment, something else is getting ready to happen. The other thing about seasons is, you know, sometimes we choose the seasons, and sometimes they just are thrust upon us.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I can choose to time to start a family, time to start a business, but you can't choose some other health challenges that arise, economic things that take place in the world, and you can't choose certain other conflicts that may happen, and I think that's a challenge as well because it's like we want to control things, but some of this you can't. You know, it just stuff comes.
Yeah, I think that's where, you know, I'm 40 this year. And so I think one thing that mentally I've kind of crossed the line where, you know, I would probably say, you know, from 35 to 39 was like, okay, I'm starting to feel confident. I understand what moves to make. That not necessarily I'm saying that I knew the right answer to everything, but I was confident in the principles of, but then
You were comfortable with your season.
yeah. But now, I think it's beginning to transition to where it's like, mentally wise, where you actually kind of realize like, okay, like you really are really kind of hanging on by a thread. You just existing, I mean, like something could go wrong in my body like right now and I could just boom and be gone, And so it's like, it's super important to use the time that you have to be intentional with what you value, because it's not guaranteed anything, And on a professional side, it's like, I got a good idea on how to do what I do, but at the same time, you realize, or I'm realizing, how much is out of my control, and I would probably say it's like 99% out of my control, other than like me, and controlling me is like honestly not a difficult thing. Now, some people struggle with that, and I'm not saying anything about that, but it's like, it can change real fast, with what you feel comfortable with and what you feel secure with. Like in a matter of minutes, it can be a totally different ballgame.
And it makes it a challenge because once we get kind of into a season, it's like some of our identity gets wrapped up in that, and we get comfortable with it, and that's all good. But then it makes it more difficult for us when we have to shift gears. Life begins to bring a different season. We're going, wait a second, I just now was figuring out what I was doing in the other one. I don't want to change yet. And so some of the tug of war, I think, that we go through spiritually and emotionally is just trying to manage that transition. I'm wanting to hang on. And where identity gets wrapped up, for instance, when if our identity gets wrapped up in being a dad, and then our kids graduate and they go off on their own, and it's kind of like, okay, now, now what am I? Our identity gets wrapped up in being a husband, and either through divorce or somebody's dead, all of a sudden we're not that anymore. And so it's managing that. We got to hold loosely, and I think that's kind of what you're referring to, Jeremy, because everything can change.
Yeah.
And so I got to hold loosely onto the identity that goes with the seasons. Okay. I could have an identity as a successful businessman, but there's no guarantee that tomorrow, things could change.
Right.
Dramatically. So that's again another one of those challenges is don't get too used to a season.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest thing, is to keep yourself detached enough to, because I guess like keep yourself detached enough to receive what God has for you next. Talking about seasons, I was like making music pretty I was dedicated to it, and doing, had like habits that had me writing every day and stuff like that. And then it just seemed like things kind of worked in a way to where that time kind of got taken away a little bit, which is fine. And it was kind of a difficult thing to like kind of let go of, because the identity was wrapped up in it, because I'd been doing it for so long. And I think that's the biggest thing is sometimes God, like you said, things happen for a season. God gives you things to teach you or to mold you in a way, and then it's on to something else. And I think a lot of times we can get, hey, I want to stay in summer. I don't want to go to fall yet or whatever. So I'm just saying with the seasons, I think it's not always the easiest thing to do, but I think it's necessary to welcome the change, because we're on a journey and God has something else for you.
That's right.
And so that's why for me, it's, I'm not like, I'm not saying this in a braggadocious type of way, but considering what I've been through these past, but really like the past 5 years have been, I mean, so sweet. So
Well,
it's
a testimony
like,
of God's miraculous power to change a heart, you know, and change a life.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
and just the way that my like things turned out, it just sometimes I'm just like this can't be real. But you know, that's what I'm saying. Is just like when God prepares you for things, and you know, there's lessons to be learned in seasons that you're gonna use like a tool for your next season that's gonna help you and keep you strengthened. You know, I think it's just healthy to say, God, thank you for that time that I was doing this. You know, I'm ready for you, you know, whatever you have for me.
Yeah, it prepared me, and that's the whole idea is that I think it's healthy for us to have a discussion about the seasons and recognize seasons for what they are.
Yeah.
Because then it helps us have that perspective that you just said, you know, that, yeah, what was God doing with me then, and how's that preparing me for what's next? But before we just move past totally the definition of seasons, I just can't stress enough. You know, we're talking right now about some circumstantial things, you know, the family, this and that. And I don't want to miss that the whole thing about seasons is that some seasons just stink, okay? You know,
Yeah.
there can be some seasons that are just painful, and but they are that. They're a season, okay? Where the main theme that's going on is just difficulty and conflict and confusion and overwhelmedness and all those other things. And so there's going to be people listening to this that might be in a really dark place because that's their season right now.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to, you know, make it all sound like all these seasons are rosy kinds of things. Some of them are not.
No.
But some of the navigation tips that, you know, okay, what can we learn as we navigate through all these seasons? And one of those tips is just a reminder that God walks with us in every season.
Yeah.
Even in your dark place, God was there.
Yeah.
You know, even in those challenging times, those times when we're feeling real alone, or, you know, God's there. Those times when we just, you know, I think I remember as young parents, you just feel like you never can get enough sleep, and you know, those days, you know, where I just don't know how I'm going to have the energy to get through. God's there, you know, and He's got you, and His truth applies. Whatever promises He's made, they apply whatever season you're in. You know, I'm with you always, even to the end of the world, and the Romans 8:28, which is one of mine, that God works all things together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. That regardless of what season I'm in, if I'm going to submit myself to God, God will work whatever's going on here, even though it may not have been His doing. It may have been my doing, but God can make good come out of it if I'm submitting myself to Him. And again, one of my big ones is seasons have a way of distracting us from spiritually what's going on, because, you know, there's this main other theme that's kind of consuming us, and it distracts us from who we are really in Christ. And Matthew 6 is the passage on the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus is talking about don't worry, you know, don't worry about how you're going to get fed and how you're going to get clothed, and apparently someone says, well, then, you know, how are we going to get fed and clothed? And Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you as well. Mm-hmm. And so one of those other themes of navigating seasons is keep your eye on Jesus. You do that, and some of the challenges within the seasons will take care of themselves.
Yeah. What does that look like practically, or what has it looked like practically for you? Like, let's take the example of you're in a difficult season that's challenging, where you feel alone, you're stressed, and you hear somebody say, "Hey, Jesus is with you."
Well,
how do you connect with that?
I think the big connection is this, and I'm jumping around on my planned outline, you know, but this is a discussion. It's not a planned outline. I get that. All right. It really is this. Every season has its own blessings and challenges, okay? And some of those challenges when they're, Jeremy, at that place like you're talking about, when it's just, oh man, I'm in a bad spot. It's to seek God within that season, okay? God's got you, okay, that sounds all good, but really the whole thing is if I will turn my attention to him, he's going to show me what I need for that season.
Absolutely.
If the question comes back, Lord, right now this stinks what's going on in my life, and I have no clue what's happening and how to get out of it or how to survive it even. So the question is, Lord, just what do you have for me in this season? Okay, what is it that you're wanting me to learn? What blessings are that I haven't really figured out yet? How do you want me to grow? How do you want to kind of refine me during this season? There's some stuff that needs to just kind of get eliminated from my life, some honing in on priorities. So I think if you're going to navigate seasons successfully, spiritually, you're going to be asking a lot of questions of God as you're going through it. It's going to have to be a dialogue, not just a survival mode.
Yeah. So as you're asking those questions, that's a dialogue piece, right? That's just
Yes.
thoughts going out and up, right? What are some action steps?
Well, I would just say every time you find yourself getting frustrated, maybe that's the reminder that I pray something like this. Lord, how are you seeking to bless me and mold me if I'll allow you to do it, okay? Because I can't tell you what the answer is for every season, but God's got you, so he's got an answer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's, rather than just getting caught up in the frustration and the darkness and letting that perpetuate itself, it's just eyes upwards and a prayer. And it may be a very simple one. Lord, what is it you'd need me to learn? I know you want to bless me in my life. How are you seeking to bless me? Because maybe I'm just not getting it right now,
Yeah.
How do you want to mold me? And another part of this would be, if we're navigating seasons, it's learning to be present in every season.
Absolutely.
And what I mean by that is, I got to be real with what's going on and how I'm feeling about that, how I'm responding to that, the good, the bad, and the ugly that's coming out of me as I'm navigating this season. Because if I'm not real about that, then it's hard for me to really acknowledge that maybe I'm in a bad spot that I've created for myself here, and there's some changes I need to make mentally and spiritually to forge ahead here. It's be in the moment, and part of being in the moment is learning gratitude and contentment wherever you are. We focus on a season about those things that are challenging. And while that's happening, we often miss out on thanking God for all the things in that season that are still
Right.
powerful.
Yeah, that's a tough one to do.
Yeah.
It's definitely an easier mindset to focus on the negative than the positive.
Well, sure.
Even though, at the end of the day, the fact that you're alive and waking up and you got a vehicle, you got a job, or even if you don't have a vehicle or a job, there's always something there that you can be grateful for. But it's a difficult thing to get past, like all these obstacles that are in your way at the moment, mentally, and I think that Satan uses that as a tool,
He does.
To drag folks down.
Yeah, because really whatever is that challenge in our season, okay? I remember I said every season's got blessings and challenges. Whatever the challenges are in the season, there's a good chance that's going to catch most of our attention, okay? That's going to be where most of our energy is focused, and then we lose perspective. Then you lose perspective on what else God's doing. And really then the whole thing comes, let's just say that your challenge is financials, that you're going through a really hard financial season where there's a whole bunch of bad stuff happening, just as an example. And that's consuming you. And you know, the financial part can, because it's like every day you're going to have to deal with it. Every moment there's a decision that's coming up that, you know, that's right there. So let's just say that's your challenging part. And then it's real easy to get stuck where you're looking around and you're seeing other people and you're saying, well, they all don't have any of these financial things. They all seem to be fine. And what you miss is there may be, if you could count them up, there may be like 10 distinctly areas in your life, and one's really going bad right now, which is the finances. Okay, but you're looking at somebody else and say, well, they got their finances together, but they may have their other problems in some of the other areas. Right. They may be having marital problems that you don't know about, or health problems. And the point would be, in our life at any given time, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going really well, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that, well, maybe not a whole bunch of stuff, but there's probably at least something that needs improvement. There's something that's, okay, this area is a challenge right now. Yeah. And you just got to keep in perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that discipline is a big piece of that?
Well, of course. I mean, discipline is always a part of any answer to growing spiritually, but I just think here on this, it's some intentionality of, I just really want to, I don't want to just go through life in the motions and just be swept up by what's happening to me on the seasons. I want to look at it. I want to pull it out and look at it through, with God's help, you know. Yeah. Again, God, what do you have for me in this? How do you want to bless me? How do you want to mold me? How do you want to use me? Right now, I'm very frustrated. What do you got for me? And I think God honors those prayers. Some of those aren't maybe so much prayers as they are pleas for help, you know. But God's going to hear that, and I think that helps us navigate a journey, and that's what it's about. But the whole thing about learning to be content in every situation. I mean, there's a lot of scriptures about that, but you know what I find, some of the scriptures I find particularly relevant here is in Philippians 4. Where Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. And then later, a few verses later, he says, I know what it is to have a lot, and I know what it is to have nothing, and I've learned how to be content in every situation. And he writes that from jail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was in jail when he wrote all that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a glimpse into how you navigate seasons and learn to be present in the moment. And present in the moment of looking how God's present in the moment with us is when he says rejoice, even though his season's not really a pleasant one at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too in that same caption of verses Philippians 4, you know, he's talking about set your mind on things above. You know, whatever is pure, holy, you know, and he goes down this list. And it's all good things, you know, godly things. And he's saying, think on that. Like, have your mind focused on goodness.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
You know, even if you're experiencing, you know, the negative side of life, you know. I think, you know, I think what's important to seasons is having realistic expectations, you know. I think a lot of the times we have these expectations, which is, I think, it's normal. It's not anything that's not a wrong desire, but we have these expectations for things to be smooth and easy, you know. But there's nothing in life where we've been promised or told, like, hey, your life is going to be smooth and easy. There's nothing. There's no evidence that supports that at all. Like, even if you don't believe in Jesus and you're just studying history of humanity, like, it's chaos.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been chaos from the beginning, you know. Well, I guess chaos since sin entered the world.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
But the thing is you got to think about that from the perspective of, you know, God created it to be perfect. We made a choice that not necessarily, I want to say, changed it, because I think that's, you know, that was God's plan the whole time. was Jesus, you know, and so it wasn't there wasn't a plan B, you know, but like he created it within perfection. Sin entered the world, and then from that point forward, it will forever be chaos until he ends it, you know.
I think one of the greatest, I call it one of the greatest understatements in Scripture, is in John 16, where Jesus says, "In this world you will have trouble." I think that's a great understatement. But then he says, "But don't be afraid, because I've overcome the world."
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean it goes with the territory, and I think, again, maybe with the perspective of having a few extra trips around the sun and having the people that are my contemporaries and we share stories, the seasons that you grow the most spiritually, guess what?
Are the difficult.
Yeah, exactly. We're the ones that were the stinkiest, you know. And sometimes they were the hardest ones, but those are the times you grow.
Yeah.
So, you I think you're right, Jeremy. If your expectation is that they all need to be nice, okay, in some ways it'd be understandable to feel that, but we're missing out on some growth opportunities if that happens.
Yeah. I think, I mean, comparison's the thief of joy, and I think a lot of times we go through things, and it's easy to look and see somebody in a different season, you know, and then you get discouraged or whatever. I think for me personally, I believe nobody can define what's successful for you personally. Some people might not feel successful until they have $2 million in the bank, but you could make $50,000 a year and be successful if you're fulfilled and that's what God has for you. I think, like I said, you start to look around or whatever, you know, and you think, oh, I'm not successful until I do X, Y, and Z, or I'm like this, and I mean, I think if you switch your perspective to, if you understand what's going on, which God puts us in the fire and, you know, kind of refines us through the hard times, like you're saying, and if you find joy in the work, then the hard times aren't that hard anymore. It's like doing a task. If you have a bad attitude during doing a task that you really don't want to do, it's going to be 100 times worse.
Yes, exactly.
And so that's why I say if you just, you know, like them horse blinders, just stay on your path. Like, you know, people have ups and downs and all that. Like, all you can do is just focus on your path and what God has for you at the moment. Like you're talking about being present, you know. And I think for me, maybe that's why I sound so rosy talking about it, is because although times have been tough, it's been freaking brutal, but I'm just saying I've learned to change my mindset to, God, thank you for this season that you're taking me through. And so once I do that, it's like I understand that there's a bigger picture going on. I mean, we talk about this all the time. It's easy to be what's right in front of you. If you take a step back and look at the big picture, you know, hey, how far have I come? Where was I at? Then you got plenty of things to be grateful for. And like thinking about where I've been to where I'm at now, I'll take these problems any day.
You go.
And so I'll take these struggles any day of the week over what I've been through. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's what I'm saying is like once that was my perspective, it's like, I mean, whatever God has for me, there's going to be joy in it. I'm not saying it won't be hard. I won't say there won't be heartbreak or anything like that, but I understand that God's refining me because I belong to Him. And so it's like if you can stay in that mindset, which it's not like I'm saying that every day. I'm just, you know, I'm just saying like
I'm a soldier.
Yeah, like I'm just saying like if you change your perspective on it, for anybody who's going through a hard time, and I know that sounds like, oh, of course it's me. There's a problem with me. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you have control. You have a choice about how you go through that refining process. Mm-hmm. You could be sour, and I mean, I think about you know, Job, you know, and his wife, and then what happened to her. what good does I haven't read one story where somebody complained and it worked out good. And so I'm just one of those people, people have been around a lot longer than 33 years. So, I mean, if I can look at that and say, I can't find a single story where somebody complained and things got better.
I'm reminded while you were talking about that, Murphy, that Viktor Frankl was a Jew in the Holocaust. Okay,
Wow.
and so you can imagine he's in. You talk about a tough season. Right. He's in an awful place in a concentration camp.
Yeah.
And in his being present and processing it, he realized that one of the things that just was so difficult, not just the pain, but feeling like he had no control over anything. Mm-hmm. He'd lost everything and he had no control. And then he realized, this is what you were saying, the one thing he could control was his response and his reaction.
Right.
That was the only thing he could control. And he could control to be still content and joyous or to be bitter. And maybe it's helpful for us to remember that joy isn't just this happy, hunky-dory feeling.
Yeah.
Joy, a few weeks ago I ran across the definition that it says joy is a settled confidence that results in worship. Yeah, it's that sense of, I know God's got this taken care of. That's settled in my mind. And because it's settled, I have a confidence, and that confidence then means coming out of my life and out of my heart is worship and praise. That's joy, okay? Yeah. And that's the kind of thing that can sustain us through any season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking of another thing that happened that relates to this. But so I'm going to take you back to when I'm in college. Okay, you ready for that? I mean,
let's do it.
You're talking ancient history.
Uh-huh.
So I'm in Bible college, and there's one evening where a few of the guys and I are in the car. I'm driving. And we're just a bunch of stupid college students, okay? Yes, we're all studying for ministry, but at the end of the day, we're all stupid college students, okay?
Yeah.
So we're driving along, and we're coming to the place where, as the road goes, there's a railroad overpass, and you can see that the train is coming just as we're going to be kind of going underneath of it, and the train's going to be coming over at that moment, and some guy from the back seat says, "Quick, everybody! Here's our chance to get a wish." And we go, what's going on? He says, this is a rule, okay? If you're going under while the train's going over, if you put both hands on the ceiling of the car and raise your feet and cross them, you'll get a wish. And of course, everybody does it, and I did it too, and I'm driving, but,
And you're still here.
Yeah, I'm still here. Well, God granted one of the wishes, perhaps. But,
There you go.
I mean, that's stupid. But, that sticks with me. So now every time I'm driving along and, you're coming under and you see a train, I'm remembering that. And through the years, whenever that would happen, I'd think, okay, what wish am I going to get? Of course, at that time, a bunch of college students, our wishes all were something involving girls or grades or something like that, but we didn't have much of a perspective. And as time's gone on, I think, okay, rather than a wish, let's turn it into a prayer. So when I go through this, God, what would I pray for? And it's kind of settled into my prayer whenever that happens is a reminder that I pray. I say, I just want to be, and I use the word smack dab in the middle of whatever God's will is for me. Okay. I figured that was one of those prayers that kind of encompassed everything. It got you covered. I want to be in the middle of God's will. And over the course of time, I get to thinking about that. And I think usually when we say that, there's this sense that that'll be a good feeling kind of thing, to be in the center of God's will. And that means things will be good. And then I think back to Paul sitting in jail. I mean, he's in the center of God's will for him at that moment, isn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
But he's in jail.
He's there because he was
And he's there.
telling people
He's there
about
because he was in the middle of God's
Right.
will. And if we think we got it hard here in the U.S., we got Christian brothers and sisters around the world who are in prison because of their faith. or killed because of their faith. And that's happened throughout the generations and including now. And they're right in the middle of God's will, and things are not good circumstantially. Okay? And it leads me to think that one way that we can probably be more successful navigating seasons is if we really work on this labeling part. Because we want to label a season as a good season if it feels good. Okay? You know, if it's a season that just seems like there's a whole lot of fun stuff, the circumstances are good, the money's good, the relationships are good, the kids are good, the job's good, and whatever, that's a good season. And I think that label might mean that we're kind of shortchanging ourselves and we're kind of missing something. Maybe the better label is that we call seasons productive instead of good or bad. Because what makes a season productive is that regardless of the circumstances, I'm present with God. I'm seeking God. I'm seeing where He's blessing me, where He's helping me grow, where He's taking me to the next step. So I guess for anyone who's listening that you feel like, you know, you're in one of those seasons that ain't fun, yes, pray that you'll be in the middle of God's will, but accept that doesn't mean that everything around you is going to go perfectly. And don't label that then as a bad season. Ask, is it being productive? Is it serving a spiritual purpose?
Yeah. I think that's the crossroads of American culture and following Jesus.
Okay, there you go.
Right? American culture tells you go for the win. You know, that's success is numbers and results, and then you read, and following Jesus and God is not always the numbers and the tangible. I mean, in the middle of God's will and in prison, you know, in the middle of God's will and dying on the cross, going through a painful death. Like, what American culture says, I'm only winning if everything's easy or goes exactly my way. And that's the exact opposite of following. And sometimes we conflate the two.
Yeah.
You know, we say, well, I mean, I'm following God, but I don't seem to be winning, or I don't seem to be doing this or that. And it's like, well, I mean, what are you looking at? What is your measuring stick
Exactly
to say that? And so that's why I say this comparison is the thief of joy, because if you're saying that, you're saying someone over there is following Jesus and has everything. So it's like, that's what I mean, is just focus on what you got and realize. And that's why I always say it's important to read scripture, because you can get a conflated idea of what it means to actually follow Jesus. And then you read scripture and realize everybody that's in the Bible had some like turmoil and hard times in their life. I mean, I don't know anybody who, can you think of one person who just had no issue?
And see, really, yes, and I agree with you, Murphy. And I read a book a while back, but it was on like what makes a great story kind of thing. Okay, you know, what makes a good story? And in any good story, there's conflict.
Yeah, there's tragedy.
I mean, because the story is, here's somebody, and then we kind of get connected with them, and now they're going through this challenge, and now, you know, if we're connected with them, we feel with them through the challenge, and then they emerge, and sometimes the emerging still isn't perfect, but we see them grow and evolve. You know, there's no great story that didn't have conflict in it. There's no great story that didn't have difficulty in it.
Right.
And what then makes it the great story is how you emerge out of it. You know, so how we emerge out of some of those seasons is what marks the great story.
Yeah.
I think the largest I don't know, I don't know how to phrase it. Maybe challenge, or maybe just how to stay focused on the truth. Like what we're discussing, like I would say I know and agree with, but then in the moment of whatever the circumstance may be, where it's not meeting my expectation, or it's challenging, or it's difficult, or it's tragedy, or it's struggle, or whatever, in that moment when you're facing it, it's more it's easier to forget to like not engage with God. You know, typically my like initial response to a challenge is, what's the solution? Let me find the solution and fix it so that it can go away, you know, and I can move on and forget about it.
Right. We want to get out of a season.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, like in the role that I'm sitting in, you know, where, you know, I'm a husband to my wife, I'm a father to my children, I'm an owner of a business, I'm a friend, you know, to a lot of guys. And, you know, when you start having conversations about life, you know, it's like, hey, you know, here's the challenge, you know. And so when people bring, you know, their baggage to have a conversation with you, as not for anything other than, hey, this is what I'm going through. Where's the first place your mind goes to? Well, let me help you, you know. So let's remove the negativity in your life, you know. And it's like maybe the focus isn't it's not maybe. The focus should not be let's remove
the circumstances.
Let's remove the circumstances or provide a solution so that you're not experiencing what you're experiencing anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's because that goes with that label we were talking about a good season or a bad season, and I think that's misleading terminology that's going to get us in trouble. And I think you're right, Jeremy. I think we need to, maybe one of the way to navigate seasons is I focus less on the circumstances of that season and try to focus more on you know, God, what do you have for me in this season? How do I grow? Because that's what makes the season productive, rather than good, bad. That God grows. And I want to go back to this thought of, you know, I want to be smack dab in the middle of whatever God's will is for me. And practically, because that sounds all wonderful, what does that look like? What does that mean? Excuse me. And I think that maybe here's a couple things. In any season, if I want to be in the middle of God's will, I need to ask myself, am I seeking God's heart? Okay. During this season, am I seeking God's heart? Because if we're in the middle of God's will, we're going to be in tune with that, regardless of what's going on around us. Am I growing in the fruit of the Spirit? Okay, Galatians 5, I think it's verse 22 and following, is where Paul says these are qualities that if the Holy Spirit is in your life and growing in your life, these qualities will just naturally come along with it because they're byproducts of the Holy Spirit being in our lives. And that's the ability to love unconditionally and to have peace and this joy that we've talked about, and to have self-discipline and self-control and kindness and goodness, and I'm probably missing a few others, but gentleness. A self-inventory along the way. All right, you know, I want to be seeking God's will, but am I growing in the Spirit? Because if I'm not growing in these qualities, you know, I can say, well, yeah, I'm really growing, but I'm miserable to be around. You know, right. Nobody wants to be there. You know, your spouse and kids cower whenever you walk in the door. It's a good sign. You know, I might not really be in the middle of God's will for me at that moment.
Yeah.
I don't know who said it, Bruce Lee or Confucius, but it was like, don't pray for an easy life, but the strength to conquer a difficult one or deal with a difficult one or something like that. I think that's, you know, pretty spot on.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was Bruce Lee or Confucius.
There's a big difference there.
Well, they're both from the East.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little difference in age gap. Maybe not quite as much as, you know, as our age gap here today between me and you all young bucks. Another part that drives me at this stage is, well, I've heard it said this way. You know, I'm definitely in the fourth quarter. You know, if you were, you know, if you're in the football stands, you know, when they start the fourth quarter and they all raise, you know, the four fingers, you know, fourth quarter is ours. And, you know, if you're in Sanford Stadium, you have your light, you know, your cell phone light going, and big thing about the fourth quarter. I'd say I'm, you know, unless I'm going to like live to 130 or something, I'm in the fourth quarter. Okay. I just hope that I'm not in overtime and nobody's told me that. But so and when you're at that spot, it's not like I'm going to die next week, or I mean maybe, but not that I'm aware of. But you want to finish well, you know. You spend your whole life hoping that you're building something of character within you that matters to other people, and that you're able to make a difference with other people, and you want to finish strong. Okay? And this topic is key towards that. Okay. If you want to finish well, then you got to navigate these seasons well, and navigate just not the fun ones, but the challenging ones too. And if you want to finish well, you actually you can't start just only thinking about that in the fourth quarter. Yeah. Okay. You start building on that much earlier, because you're building the foundation of how you approach life and the difference that we're able to make through God's grace in other people's lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How I know we're getting close to closing up, but how would you say that, or encourage, like Murphy and I, we're in a different season than you, and you've been around the sun more, like you said. How would you encourage that focus on preparing to finish well?
Well, I'd first of all say it's helpful to remind ourselves whatever season you're in, it's temporary. Okay. If it's a season that you're just enjoying the heck out of, great. But remind yourself that's temporary too. Okay. If it's a season that's normally challenging, you'll get through it. It's temporary. Okay. It's walking with God. I think we get led way too much on analyzing the circumstances. And Murphy, I think you were right when you talked about the American propaganda of what it means to be and unfortunately that gets crossed over, not just, hey, this is what, the American dream, but it filters into the church as well. That, absolutely. Hey, if you're God-fearing, then God's going to bless you and all this other stuff that, So, the counsel is walk with God and just try to be intentional, try to be aware, have ongoing conversations. I don't know what works for you. I know that different times for me, walking just does good. I go out for a walk, and sometimes I'm listening to praise music. Sometimes I'm listening to something, like the Masculine Revolution on a podcast or something like that. Okay. But other times I just turn it all off, and I just want to be there with my thoughts, because I know my thoughts are God's thoughts, and God's going to speak to that. And, every now and then, because your mind's going to wander, and when your mind wanders, you just, keep coming back with a statement like, okay, God, here I am. I'm back. Here I am. What do you have for me?
Yeah.
And if we go through life that way, then you're going to finish well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think a big piece of it is being present, like you said. A moment comes to my mind when, COVID kicks off, and it's doing what COVID does. And, there's a lot of unknown, and people are uneasy, and there's a major life change as far as, just what people are doing on an everyday basis. And we went down to Lake Martin, and I was sitting on a dock, and it was early morning, and like there were birds flying over the lake, fish were jumping, and it was just the world was waking up, and it was funny because the first thing that came to my mind was like, here we are in this moment where, every person that I know is looking around kind of like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, the world just changed.
Right, but yet here I am in just nature looking around, and nothing has changed. Like what was happening 2 months ago in that at that location was still happening. Like birds are still flying, fish are still sitting there getting some breakfast in the morning off the top of the water. Like And so it's just like, look, all of this is like all that. Like I have no control over whether or not a bass eats a gnat off the top of the water, you know. And most of the time, I don't even know that it's even happening because I'm not paying attention. But there's a lot going on in this world that is completely out of our control, but it is under His control, and it's working just like He created it to, you know. And so a lot of the times, even though I struggle in those circumstantial moments, when I have the opportunity to detach, I look at it and I say, like, I don't know the answer, and I don't know what's going to end up, you know, happening through this circumstance that I'm experiencing. But at the end of the day, like, it's all good, you know, because like it's this thing is big.
Yeah,
you know?
God's got it,
and it's beyond me, you know, and beyond what I can do. And it's like where, you know, you said it, Tim, where it's like, look, you can't control anything other than yourself and your reaction. And honestly, that's all that Jesus is asking us to do.
That's right.
You know, He's not saying, I want you to, you know, orchestrate and dictate and control all of this. He doesn't say that at all. He just says, look, I want you to trust in me. And that's all you got to do.
Yeah, well, we've used this phrase about being present in our season, and maybe if that's not connecting with someone, maybe another way to say, embrace each season. Okay, lean into it, because in every season there's something for us, and there's an opportunity to grow. There's blessings that we might have overlooked or be overlooking because we're just kind of stuck gazing at the part of it we don't like. And but all these things will pass. You know, the constant is, yes, that God that orchestrated everything and keeps everything together, you know, He's there. And that's the constant amongst all the seasons. So yeah. That's what I got for us.
That's good.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing. Appreciate you taking the time the early morning to come sit with us and share some wisdom.
Well, I'm not sure how wise it is, but we'll see. You know, it is early. I'll agree with you on that part. I'd love to be able to pray for whoever might be listening to this somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Father. Thanks for the opportunity to just talk about not just our lives, but talk about you being present in our lives. And so, Lord, I don't know who's going to be listening to this and when they're going to be listening to this, but you do. And I just pray that if there's someone listening that's going through some challenging seasons, that there'll be a reminder here to just lean in and lean into you and to your message. And I just pray that we'll all navigate these seasons in a way that pleases you, that we'll be in the middle of your will as we're going through it, that we'll seek you with our hearts and we'll see your spirit growing in our lives. And we pray and thank you in advance for the victories that you've already given in our lives through some tough times and the victories that are yet to come. And we'll give you the glory for all of them in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Yeah. Like I said, I appreciate you. Appreciate you coming on. As always, y'all can reach out to us at masculinerevolution@gmail.com with comments or questions, our Facebook page, or just reach out to us in person if you see us. Appreciate you tuning in. Hope y'all get something out of this. Till next time.
Join the family.
Yes, sir.